This is the latest version of my design of the adventure map. Adventure map, as it's commonly called in the Heroes and Might and Magic games. That's where my hero would typically, or heroes would typically explore the countryside and collect resources and stuff like that. This design was actually implemented based on what I've put together in this PowerPoint presentation. So this was designed with map making in mind, so with the idea of putting together a map making tool. So it includes kind of like a flow of activity that would be undertaken when designing a map. So the first step will be to choose the map size. In this case it's 8 tiles by 8 tiles, and also to choose the default elevation. This is just to minimize the amount of work needed to change the elevation of each tile to something else. So the most common one would be chosen as the default. Here I've got planes, so each of these is a plane. Once that's done, then the map maker would be free to change the elevation of any given tile to something else, so for example to a mountain or to a hill or to the sea. So these are the 4 elevations that were currently envisaged, and that will be stored in the elevation layer, which would be separate from, let's say, terrain layer, which would come after, where the map maker would choose different kinds of terrain for different tiles. These are a little bit different in terms of presentation from what I've got here. Here I've got some weird textures which I'm actually thinking maybe I'll drop later on. They kind of make the appearance quite busy. So here there's no textures, it's just different colors for different terrains. In a separate layer, the map maker would choose the vegetation for each tile. So it might be like a tree, grass, or tree stump. A tree stump being a burned down tree. In a layer separate to that, they would choose the precipitation. So over here I've got 3, I've got snow, ice and oil. Oil might seem like a bit of a weird thing to fall from the sky, but in terms of gameplay it can be a lot of fun in terms of game mechanics, so it's included. And then the last layer will be the object layer, so that's where the armies would be stored, map structures, even natural map structures like a geyser or a volcano. And once all of those are laid out, the map would result from combining them like this. So essentially we would just draw all the tiles from all the layers and rely on transparency to produce the desired effect. So if you look at a tile like this, it's basically a result of all these different individual tile artworks being laid on top of each other. And as long as transparency is handled correctly, we get to see a usable combination. Alright, so that's how this map was produced. Now, to look at the code, it actually does that. So in Godot, I'm using the object called a TileMap. So it's a type of node known as TileMap, which actually supports layering out of the box. So I've defined different layers that would correspond to the PowerPoint presentation. I did change a couple of things. So if I look over here, I've split base terrain and fluid terrain, whereas the PowerPoint only had one terrain. I did that to make it easier to change the terrain during the game. So for example, during the game it might be possible to block a river or to empty a lake, which would reveal the terrain underneath. So it would reveal the base terrain. And then another change was to create, well, it's more like a rename, the precipitation layer. Over here it's called the effect layer, because in the game design these different things like ice and snow are modeled as effects. Okay, so how is that implemented? So if you look at these layers, so there's a function here called draw mission map. I'm using the term mission map instead of adventure map for now at least, which takes a grid as a parameter. Now a grid is defined in the C# portion of the game, so that's here. So this is a particular map that I've defined over here, which, well, it will have a volcano on it eventually. So which defines the grid object over here, and then it adds a whole bunch of tiles to it. So that basically each of these corresponds to a hexagon on the map. And each tile has coordinates, and then it has the various layers that are added to it. So if you look at how the tile is defined, so a tile knows its elevation, it knows the base terrain, fluid terrain, vegetation, and so on. So all of this is put together here and then passed to the Godot portion of the game that draws it. So the way it draws it is that it takes the grid and then it loops through all the tiles that are on the grid. For each tile it works out its coordinates so that it knows where to draw it, and then it goes through the layers. So it checks, okay, for that tile, what is the base terrain, and then it draws that on the base terrain layer. What's the fluid terrain? Draws that on the fluid terrain layer. The same with effects, the same with elevation, vegetation. Well, in this case, just structures. It doesn't have the code yet to draw troops and other stuff, just the map buildings. And that's how the map is drawn. And that's how we end up with this layout over here.